Here's an article at blackbag.gawker.com by Adam Weinstein, entitled, "Is Ancient History Completely Made Up by the Man?" And we have a super chat from Chili Peen. From Elizabeth, so happy to see you again soon. So happy to see you again. Happy to see you as well, as Elizabeth, as well as your son Chili. And the author begins, "Assume a notable story on a notable day in history. The lunar landing, say, was fabricated. Now assume that 400,000 to 2 million such days were concocted. You begin to get a sense of the scope of new chronology, the empirical statistical theory that much of human history is a fiction, assembled to serve the powerful." Can you recall your middle school social studies lessons? How at some willowy point in your 11th or 12th year, you learned that recorded history begins with the appearance of writing. There were the Mesopotamians with their cuneiform scripts, the Egyptians' hieroglyphs and demotic scrawls, and later the Greeks and Romans, whose societies formed the backbone, for better or worse, of our own, if only because they kept such meticulous records. We have all sought and found these connections to our past, in museums, in books, in the ground. This is our inheritance. And it is ingrained in us so early, so matter-of-factly, that it permeates most of our existences, without demanding critical reflection. But what if it's all bullshit, writes the author. Anatoly Fomenko would like to blow your mind now, please. He will be assisted by chess grandmaster Garry Kasparov, as well as Sir Isaac Newton. Since 1980, Fomenko, mathematician at Moscow State University, and full member of Russia's prestigious Academy of Sciences, it's the Academic Academy, has been a leading proponent of a radical revision of human history, an improved version of the global chronology of the ancient times, as he and collaborator Gleb Nasovsky has put it, based on statistical and astronomical analyses. Fomenko believes there is no reliable written record of human events before the 11th century. Most of our knowledge of earlier cultures is based on texts or copies of texts that date from after that era. From that point on, chroniclers, primarily learned religious scholars, used supposition and arbitrary consensus to fix the dates of key events in history. In doing so, they grafted recent occurrences onto earlier dates, sometimes unwittingly, sometimes perniciously, thus creating numerous historical duplicates. History appears to repeat itself, suggests Fomenko, though it is thoroughly plagiarized. Because it is thoroughly plagiarized. Important distinction there. In his chronology, the events of the New Testament precede those of the Old. And in any case, most of the stories are concocted to reflect later incidents. Joan of Arc was a model for the biblical Cara Deborah. Jesus Christ was crucified in Constantinople in the year 1086. Ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, and ancient Greece were fashioned by Renaissance writers and artists. The time of the pharaohs, Fomenko suggests, may well have lasted into the 1700s. Aristotle instructed Alexander the Great, who was a czar in Moscow in the 1400s. Early English history, from the accepted names and dates to the apocryphal legends of a post-Roman King Arthur, is actually a carbon copy of 4th century Byzantium, which is itself a fiction based on late medieval events. Speaking of carbon, don't bother relying on carbon dating or other scientific chronological methods, says Fomenko. They are premised on the old dating system, and hence are thoroughly corrupted. The author asks, this version of events is substantiated by hard facts and logic, validated by a new astronomical research, and statistical analysis of ancient sources to a greater extent than anything you may have read and heard about history before. In short, he argues, excuse me. Whoops, wrong way, wrong button. Thank you. In short, he argues, we are Baudrillardian copies without an original. We are in a matrix with medieval rules. These rules are explained in a 7-volume corpus by Fomenko that opens with Orwell's famous saw from 1984. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. The late Russian social critic, Alexander Zinoviev, provided the foreword to this masterwork. Quote, "The entire history of humanity up until the 17th century is a forgery of global proportions," he wrote. "A falsification as deliberate as it is universal." End quote. And here's his 7-book series, History, Fiction or Science? It sounds insane and it is derided by most modern scholars, but in fact, the new chronology has a rich history of its own, with roots in the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, in the sincere conviction that what is real is what's demonstrable. It just so happens that much of humanity's recollection of history is shakily reconstructed and not so easily proven. Orwell's old cliché about control of the past may come as a shock to young first-time readers of 1984, but to chronologists it's old hat. Historical chronology, wrote the German historian Dietrich Hermann Hegewich in 1854, is necessary to furnish a principle of order and to promote the orderly arrangements of social life. The murkiness of humanity's timeline is an age-old problem. Absent a solution, society itself cannot function. Entire religious schisms turn on how church fathers set the dates for certain biblical events. This stuff is important. But until science became science, a certain imprecision was baked into the effort. Ancient cultures could observe the patches of time through astronomy, tracking the movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars. But how they affixed these events on a timeline varied wildly. Even within a single culture, political and religious upheavals brought new timelines. Within 2 millennia, according to the old history, the one Fomenko challenges, citizens of Rome recognized 3 different calendars: the Roman, the Julian, and the Gregorian. The more time passes, the more necessary it became for a chronicler to reconcile all these disparities.